Hello, everyone. Welcome to Deliberately Intentional, the podcast that talks and covers all things intentional living. Today's topic is why did I get married? Everyone thinks that with what I show, that marriage is something that I must have been dreaming about all my life, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I'll give you guys a bit of context. I didn't see fabulous marriages. The only ones that I felt were good were in books. That was the only place. Now, I was an avid reader. I had Mills and Boom books, Barbara Cartland, Danielle Steele, anything and everything, because I was a voracious reader. I was one of those kids that was not engaged enough, so I had to find things to keep myself busy, and I was always reading books. I have been the person to read a dictionary. I probably read a dictionary twice. That's how much I love to read, and I didn't really have that many books, so I resorted to a dictionary. But I say all that to say that I didn't really see it. My parents' marriage was not great. Prior to me getting into college, I didn't really see, of course, when you're prior to college at home, we didn't really have that many friends or family friends that I could say I saw their family life and their lives were better than ours. I think I had my one uncle who we saw, uncle and aunt that we saw sporadically, but we didn't really have anyone else. We really kept to ourselves, and the ourselves that we were in, our household was not necessarily the best. So I didn't really have anything other than my dreams. And for the longest, because I felt my dreams were in direct conflict with what I was seeing, I said I was never going to do it. So here comes, I think, so this was my all throughout my teenage years. And when I got into college, it started to shift a little bit. And the only reason why it shifted was because I started to see happier families. Now, family has always been important to me, which is because that's all I had. My sisters, my brother, we were very closely connected. And that didn't really have that many friends then, but that kept us tightly connected to each other, and we were reliant on each other because of that. Now, by the time when I got to college and I started making my own friends and they started bringing me into their world, and I was like, okay, wait a second. The world is not exactly like it is in my house. There are people that are happy. Oh, really? I still, now mind you, this is a conflict that was still going on until I ran away from home because of my unhappiness and everything else, and I wanted a better life for my siblings. So a part of me used to say that I wanted to be like Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell. And don't ask me why, but they've been together for almost 40 years. I haven't paid attention to their relationship recently, but they'd been at that point in time, we're talking about 20, 30 years ago in my mind. Wow, these people are together and they're just together and they seem happy. That was just what was going on in my mind. This young girl didn't have her parents' marriage to look around and look up to, didn't really have anyone else close to look up to. So it was, of course, the stars, which is what happens with most people. If you don't have anything around you that's uplifting you, you're going to resort to the one thing that's seemingly available to you, which is either on TV or in magazines. And so I was no different. I used to think that their relationship just seemed so romantic. That's what I wanted. So I didn't say that I didn't want love. I wanted love. I knew I was definitely everyone's lover girl. I loved my friends. I doted on people. But I didn't really think that I didn't have hope for a relationship for myself. I knew I'd had kids. I'd gone as far as thinking about getting a sperm donor. Don't ask me why, but back then I was very futuristic in my thinking. We was still rather new, and I was in Nigeria. Don't ask me what book I read because I can't remember, but all I knew is I was one of the first people to know about um, sperm donors and stuff like that. And my friends looked at me like, what is wrong with this girl? Why aren't you thinking about a marriage? I'm like, no, I'm never getting married. I want to be happy. And I don't think that a marriage is going to make me happy. So fast forward to now meeting my husband. If I'm being 100% honest, when we got married, yes, I loved him. Okay, let me backtrack. I loved him. I knew that from very shortly. I knew I loved him, but I still didn't have much faith in the whole terminology or the institution of marriage because of what I had seen. So yes, I love this guy, but I'm still not believing in the whole thing called marriage. So why would I be dreaming about it or planning towards it? I wasn't. Until they told me that, okay, so backtrack again. We met in Nigeria. I was living in America and he was living in London. So, of course, somebody had to move. this is something that a lot of people don't think about thoroughly. We had both said that he was going to move to the US. But I think when we were going through it, September 11th happened, and I just didn't want to be in New York anymore. So I said, you know what, I'm going to London. So I moved to London. While we were in London, I got pregnant. And yes, we kind of loosely planned it. It wasn't an unplanned pregnancy, but it wasn't planned. I had taken out the birth control, and we were like, before we had taken it out, we were like, well, if anything happens, we're good, right? Or should I just do more birth control? He says, no, we're good. We both agree. And so we're like, okay. They say it's going to take a year to get out of your system anyway. That's not what happened with me. I think I was pregnant 3 months, 3 months later. And so here we are. I'm in London. We're both living in London. We're not married. And then I get pregnant. And I'm like, sure, everything is still okay because I'm not in touch with my dad. Nobody's giving me any pressure. Nobody's giving him any pressure. So we were actually okay to continue our life the way it was without getting married until I was told that my son would not get papers. Okay, automatically. Now I'm like, wait, hold up a second. What do you mean my son's not going to get papers? They're like, well, unless you're married, your son won't get British citizenship. He would automatically get American citizenship because you're American. And of course, you would get the Nigerian just through the heritage, but he wouldn't get the British one. At that point in time, the British paperwork or just actually scratch that. If you're a Nigerian, you know how important it is to make sure you have all your ducks in a row. If you have gone through the stress that I've gone through with passports, you would understand that, wait, there's just one mere formality. I'm going to do it for that reason. I want my son to be able to have everything. I want him to have, 3 citizenships, as many as he possibly could, just because I just wanted him to have everything in the world that I did not have. So I was looking out for him. We literally got married probably the day, I waited because we were allowed, the way it works in the UK, you're allowed to file your papers a couple of weeks after you've had the baby. So I think I was supposed to have had him in October, scheduled our registry date for November 1st. And believe it or not, my son refused to come. So I was still pregnant while I got married. I finished getting married. I got married in the morning, and my son decides he wants to come into the world legitimate. So he comes in that day. I went into labor the same day I got married. So I have pictures of me with a big old belly, signing off, and then literally going probably the same day to the hospital. That was how funny and true our story was. We used to say that he was always very proper because he refused to come into the world until we were married. Why did I bring that story up? Because without it, you won't understand how bumpy my beginning was. And it was bumpy. See, we got married, but I don't think either one of us, we didn't do any marital counseling. I think it was again, I said registry, right? It was a registry wedding, which means it was nothing fancy. We just took ourselves and 2 of our friends went with us, and we went up and we got signed the papers, and that was it. And basically, it was mainly done for my son's benefit. Not because we didn't love each other, but I'm just telling you how ill-prepared we were for everything that comes with marriage. So that was going. I'm like, I've got it. My son's got his paperwork, blah, 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 blah. But what happens next? What about all the other things? Nobody kind of prepares you for what marriage is supposed to be. Now, I knew the things that I liked about him were still there, meaning I love the fact that we could talk about anything. I love the fact that he liked my personality and I liked his. I love the fact that we were always very different. We were never like, I was different from my friends and he was very different from his friends. And we were kind of like both anomalies. So 2 anomalies kind of met each other. For Nigerian terms back then, for Nigerian individuals back then, there were not very many people with tattoos, and there were definitely not that many people with piercings. So we both kind of came together in our oddities or differences, and the fact that we also we had friends that were very conservative, very traditional, but we knew we were different. And so it's like 2 very different people coming together, but how exactly are these 2 different people supposed to make it work? So we didn't really know what we were doing. That's the God's honest truth. And when I say to people most of the time that the reason why I'm still married is because of my son, I actually truly mean it. Because as much as I knew about life was that, the little I knew about life at that point in time was that everything I did would reflect on my son. everything my husband did would also reflect him. But I kind of always knew that they're more, it's heavier on the woman. Why? Maybe because we're the ones that carry the babies. Maybe we're the ones that are more in tune to the home. But there are just some things that I know for a fact that my husband just would not know to do. And he wouldn't know how to pull certain things together. He is a great individual. He's a great man and I love him dearly. But there's just some things that are, it's until I brought it up and he's like, I would never have thought of that. I mean, we're comfortable enough to the point where we are right now that he would say, I would never have thought of doing something like that unless now that you brought it up, I can see it, but I would never have thought of that. There were things that I remember walking through a school when my son was still swimming and I looked around and I'm like, I've never been on a campus like this. We were going for a swim meet. And at that point, I was looking around like I'd never been to a school that big. The two schools that I'd been to was Ondo State University. If you know that place, what it even looks like now is great in comparison to what it was like when we went there. So I'd been there. Then I'd been to Medgar Evers College, which was one building, if I was lucky. Back then, it was just one building. So I now coming onto like the likes of Princeton and coming to schools like Rutgers, I'm like, oh no, my son has to go to a place like this. I didn't know places like this existed. So my point is, there's a lot that's happened to me in my life, especially in regards to marriage, that had a lot to do with my son. What people don't realize when you're talking about that, you don't want to get married or you don't want to be in a relationship is you are limiting yourself. You're limiting your own growth. I realized that because I was married, there are so many experiences that I probably never would have had. Even though my dream growing up was to be Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell, I realized that the structure and the sanctity of marriage gives you as a person, both of you, the same structure that's required to make things work. You realize that, okay, there's a reason why you're fighting. There's a reason why you're laying this foundation, and it's a good reason. And you're setting everything up for yourself. We're not actually meant to be alone, believe it or not. As humans, we thrive off of friendship, off of camaraderie, off of love. That's the one thing that whether you like it or not, we're all looking for. We all want to be accepted. So when I got married and where I was when I got married and where I am now are like night and day. But it's over the years and the various things that have happened that have gotten me there. So when I got married initially, I didn't have the right tools, the right thoughts. I didn't have anything correctly done. And so this message is actually for those people that feel like, oh, we didn't get married for the right reasons, and probably I made a mistake, or he never loved me, or she never loved me. But you are already in it. You can make it work, you know. You can make a decision to say that, yeah, this is where I find myself. I want to give my kids the best. I also want to be happy. I'm going to try to find a way to make this work. Because that's kind of what I said to myself. When people say, oh, I'm with my spouse because of the kids, I was with my husband because of my son, but I also knew I wanted to be happy. So I actually made moves to make sure I was happy with him as well. Whatever issues we had, I went out of my way to try to resolve it. We must talk about it. We must figure it out. Tell me what I did that offended you. You tell me what I'm doing that's offending you, and I'll tell you what you've done and what you said, how it makes me feel, so we can get better, so we don't have this issue happening again. Even if your beginning was wrong, and I've seen this happen with many people, I've seen people in arranged marriages have beautiful relationships. I've seen people that it was only because he knocked the girl up that they got married and it ended up being great. I've had people that it was a one-night stand that they turned into a whole marriage. I mean, the reasons are many, but it's the people within it that decide to make it work. And that could also be you. Why I got married was not a good reason, but it's not the same reason why I'm still married today. My son is grown now. I'm married today because he's my best friend. He's the person that makes me the happiest, and he's the person that I want to grow old and die with. But like it or not, as aggravating as you may be, and as annoying as he may be, and as annoying as I may be with him, I still wouldn't want to be more annoyed or more aggravated by anybody else because we've actually grown together and we've grown to understand each other. You need that. Whether you like it or not, as much as it seems like, oh, I don't want to be responsible to anyone. I don't want to have to answer to anyone. I don't want to have to do this long list of things that everyone doesn't want to do when they're married. There's a reason why you should. I was in an elevator earlier today with one of my neighbors, and she is alone. And I feel like I only see her probably once a year. I've seen her maybe twice in 2 years. And that's exactly what I said to her. I said, I feel like I only see you once a year. She's like, well, I'm by myself. My family's not here. I'm like, no husband, no kids. She's like, no. And I work from home. So I'm like, you don't come out at all. She's like, no, she does not. And I'm like, what are you doing about that? She's like, I know I should change, but there's just no motivation to do so. She's like, I know I should change. I've been talking about it for a few years. But what happens when you wake up every morning, the house is empty, or your apartment is empty, and there's nobody there pushing you to even get dressed? Screen is off. You don't need to. Nowadays, your Zoom doesn't even need to have the camera on. You roll out of bed and you roll into your meeting. You grab something to eat, finish that off, you roll right back. For some people, that's their reality. Yeah, okay, let me add a little bit more color to it. Some people might step out every so often. They'll step out, they'll be, oh my God, the life of the party. But guess what? When they're done, they go right back to being by themselves. So whether you like it or not, the reason why you should get married is not for the other person, it's also for you. Even if you think that, oh, I want to stay alone, that existence gets very, very lonely. I know so many people, successful people, people that are high end, you can every walk of life. I know people in, and not a lot of them are happy with their lives. Everybody's looking for someone. And the higher up you go, the harder it gets. Because not only are you still set in your ways, it's hard for you to mingle, to meet people. The older we get, the harder it is, unless you're making a very intentional effort to do so. So when I look at my son, he wants to get married. You know why he wants to get married? Because of what he's seen with us. Most of us didn't have that. So if you are not making an intentional choice to make sure that, you know what, I know that this thing exists. I know happy marriages exist. I know there are people that are happy and I don't want to be alone. Then you find your person. But you also have to realize, even as you're finding this person, there's a lot that comes with marriage that even just comes with you sharing your space, doing anything with somebody else. Marriage is one of the more intricate, detailed relationships that you need to understand yourself and need to know how to work well with other people. And a lot of us don't know how to do that. If anything, with the way the world is going, we're becoming more and more isolated in our thinking. Like, you know what, it's all about just what I want. More and more people are getting isolated in their thinking, and you're not thinking about the fact that you need to make room for another person. You need to realize that you're not meant to be alone. So the more you think about that and the more you act on that, the better it's going to be for you. I got married initially for my son, but I'm staying married because it's the happiest place for me. I want that to be the same for you. It takes work. Your spouse is going to offend you. Spouse is going to annoy you. There's going to be things you did not expect in marriage. But marriage is one of those things that I call higher education that just kind of never ends. We've gone through so many different phases, and that's normal for life. I went through a different phase when I was 40. I'm in a different phase now that I'm 50. And I'm probably going to be in a different phase when I'm 60. The same applies to my husband. But because we've been at this long enough, we've had enough time to adjust to each other. So when these changes come, it's easier to deal with because we're used to each other. As the changes come, some I can predict. I'm good at predicting his moods. I know him really that well, so it's easy for me. Most of you do not know your spouses that well. Most of you don't even know yourselves that well. So when you're thinking about getting married, you should do a couple of things. Take stock and choose wisely if you can. Some people, it's out of their hands. Everyone's reasons for getting married. I'm not one to judge. So trust me, I've heard it all in this business. So I don't judge anybody. But you should strive for your happiness. And it should be a combined happiness of you, your spouse, and your kids. Because even if you and your spouse are happy, you could be happy. Then your spouse is not happy, then your kids are not happy, then you're still going to be unhappy. You and your spouse could be happy, then your kids are not happy, then you're still unhappy. You need to all be happy. And that's an important thing that a lot of us don't think about. So in order to do that, please consistently work at it. go and find people that can help you. Of course, I'm one of those people because you can reach out to me via DM, send an email. Hey, my door is wide open because I'm really passionate about making sure that there are more and more happier couples. The happier the couples are, the happier the kids are. Have you realized that there's so many things that we read in the world where we're talking about people's autobiographies and they're talking about their lives and they all talk about the fact that their lives changed when either a parent died or there was a divorce, or there was a separation, they were fighting. It's always back to the family. And that's one of the reasons why family is so incredibly important to me. So I got married, you can say for my son, but I'm staying married because I'm happy. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Deliberately Intentional. If you take anything away from today's episode, it's that happy marriages do exist. I want that for you because you have a long time that you're going to be alive for, and you need all of that time to be happy times. Stay tuned and join us again next week. Thanks, everyone.